Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I'm sorry for the quality once again. I'm still traveling, but very soon I will be back and we're gonna get to the good stuff. But in the meantime, let's talk about bad news for Russia because there are plenty. Ukraine has achieved a new record, a massive drone and missile strike that happened just recently on the territory of Russia. Multiple regions of Russia have been targeted, and reportedly over 20 missiles and over 200 drones have been used to strike different facilities. We're talking oil refineries. We're talking oil storage facilities, including the same oil storage facility in Engels that was used for the fueling of the strategic bombers. Additional parts of that facility have now been struck. And there's still plenty of targets, as you can see on this picture. Greens are the facilities that are still yet to be targeted by the Ukrainian armed forces, but the damage has been dealt and it's been significant. Moreover, there is the same facility right next to it. There was a big train station in which they unloaded missiles and bombs that are used for these planes, and there was a big explosion as well. Beyond that, targets in Bryansk, Kazan, Oryol, Voronezh, and other regions of Russia have been struck by drones over this night. Now, this is impressive not because Ukraine just struck targets and we see big bada boom. It's always nice to see that. But the main point that I want to underscore here is the reported numbers of 200 plus drones plus 20 missiles. This means that the capabilities of Ukraine to conduct long-range strikes are growing. If last year in 2024 we were mostly talking about Ukraine striking Russia with maybe tens of drones, almost 100 at some point, then now we're talking about 200 drones being used for the strikes. Well, if this will continue going on, then probably by the end of 2025, we will see already maybe over 1,000 drones flying to Russia overnight. This is also interesting because Sweden and Ukraine have reported to test out the drone swarm technology, and this is fascinating. Whenever we think about drone swarm technology and we think about how it can be used, we always consider some kind of a FPV drone, smaller drones that can dominate the battlefield in like the smaller area, but not everyone is considering, well, what about the strategic level? If Ukraine is able to send 1,000 drones to the territory of Russia, what if all of these drones are actually interconnected and are being used as a part of the drone swarm technology? For example, you would strike specific targets inside of the territory of Russia, and you would have some kind of priority list on that targets, like where exactly in these facilities you would like the drones to hit. If a drone gets shut down, then another drone can improve the priority list for itself and strike a more valuable targets that was supposed to be struck by some drone beforehand. So there is a lot of applicability here with the drone swarm technology, especially also for strategic striking drones. But the good news do not stop for Ukraine. Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Umerov, actually reported that United Kingdom is looking to make additional investment into Ukrainian weapons production on the territory of Ukraine. Multiple times on this channel, I have underscored just how good of a solution that is. Producing weapons right now in Europe is just not very cost efficient. Production of the same things of ammunitions or technologies inside of Europe can cost 3, 4, 5 times more than it would cost in Ukraine, just because the labor and resources are so much cheaper in Ukraine. And this is a great solution for a lot of the countries in Europe to potentially leave the investments that they do into Ukrainian side about the same size, though I wish they would be bigger, but also increase the efficiency of those investments. And United Kingdom is not the only one that is doing that. Just recently, current German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius came to visit Kyiv himself, where there was a lot of negotiations specifically about additional investments and additional weapons productions for Ukraine. And he also stated that investments in Ukraine is something that they are really interested in. Another topic that interests everyone is what will Donald Trump do? He will take the office of the White House in less than a week, and there is a lot of different rumors and there's a lot of discussions about what he will and he will not do. I so far stand by my assessment that Donald Trump is still a wild card, and it can fall either way, but it seems more and more that with understanding the situation in Ukraine better, talking with Zelensky, talking with the European allies, it seems that at least some of his positions and perspectives of these positions are definitely changing. We don't see this bravado of ending the war just by the snap of his fingers. We're seeing that there is some kind of a more sober assessment of what is exactly expected to be achieved by the Americans here. I would definitely expect that Donald Trump will be looking to try to get United States out of participation in this conflict. But as reported for Financial Times, it is not as easy as everyone thinks, mostly because Donald Trump and his team are obsessed with the perspective of strength. He doesn't want to be compared to Biden, to leave a situation to be perceived by when the US troops withdrawal from Afghanistan happened. For Donald Trump, if this argument still becomes prevalent and there's enough diplomatic work done by the allies, then staying strong can be understood as Ukraine actually coming out on top in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This has been said by the different media articles, this has been said by certain politicians in their speeches, and my best guess of what specifically we might expect happening is that for sure Donald Trump will be pushing European allies to increase their defense spending. And you know that I am very much for it. Now, there is a difficult and complicated history between me and Donald Trump, and his supporters in this channel will not going to deny that, but I'm definitely for the fact that the Europeans need to be increasing their defense spendings. Not because Europe is not doing enough. I think that is absolutely bankrupt narrative. We have actual data showing that Europe is actually sending a lot more help, both military and not, to Ukraine than it is, but the fact that it is in European interest to make sure that Ukraine receives much more than that. We need to be doing more than the US is doing, period, and preferably much more. And this has been also stated by the NATO chef Mark Rutte. Just recently, he made a couple of very good statements. I'm going to quote it here. Everything I'm seeing at this moment is not nearly enough. And if we don't do it, raise the defense spending, then we are safe for now, but not in our 4 or 5 years. So if you don't do it, get your Russian language courses or go to New Zealand. And he's absolutely right. Europeans, we need to be investing more in Ukraine, and that's why I'm really glad that Boris Pistorius came to Ukraine to talk about additional investment. That United Kingdom, while not being in the EU, is still on the European continent. I'm pretty sure that Russian success in Europe would not benefit the United Kingdom. So yes, we are definitely required to do much more for Ukraine, and my hopes is that we will do it as fast as possible. And Donald Trump, while wild card, we definitely should see as a benefit that he will be pushing a lot of these European allies to increase their defense spending and support for Ukraine. The only argument that I really want to continue dismissing is that somehow Russia will just negotiate with Donald Trump about what they want to do. Now, do they want to do this? Because it's been presented many times by the Russian speakers that they would really want to talk with the United States. Well, they want to talk, but they want to talk it as essentially going back to the imperial times. They want to sit down as two countries like Soviet Union and Nazi Germany and essentially draw a map and decide this will go into my sphere of influence, this will go into your sphere of influence, and essentially make a divide of the map without consulting with any kind of European allies, without consulting with Ukraine and everyone else. The situation is obviously not like that, especially in Europe. We see European powers coming together. A lot of the power centers are now being shifted to Poland. A lot of that is also being shifted in the Nordics. So there's additional powers that are present. And my goal is to make sure that we in Europe are still becoming very active and we are deciding ourselves what kind of future we're living in. Because Russians most definitely are not looking to surrender or anything. You just need to listen to Russians themselves. Here is an article from the Russians' own own Patrushev talking about what Donald Trump is proposing. There, he's stating that obviously they would like to talk about how they would like to divide Europe and so on. But most importantly, they are stating that in absolutely no terms there can be any negotiations on giving up, as he puts it, giving up of the newly attached territories, annexed to territories by Russia to back to Ukraine. So essentially, the territory of Zaporizhia, the Donetsk region, Luhansk region, and Kherson region should be absolutely in control of Russia. And he obviously means in the administrative districts, because that's how they're written in the Russian constitution. I will remind you that Russia does not control the major populations and centers in those areas, minus the Donetsk and Luhansk that have been there from the start. Russia was actually kicked out of Kherson, the most probably the biggest city that they were able to capture during this whole war period. So no, Russians are not looking to negotiate in good faith. They're not looking to any kind of negotiated solution. They will continue pushing and dragging the time. They continue pushing to try to sell that Donald Trump just needs to sell off Ukraine. But it is in our power to maybe convince Donald Trump and his team that it would not be in his own personal best interest. But Russia itself is not strong. Russia is actually very weak. It is running on borrowed time. And for a longer time, I've been telling you that, but there was never one point that I can just point you towards that would really state that, yes, indeed, there is big problems in Russia. We all understood that because there was multiple small things, but it was hard to convince because it was perceived by a lot of the Western analysts. They were looking at the Russian reported numbers. They were looking at how Russia spoke. They were listening to Putin instead of listening to what the actual experts say in the field. And instead, finally, we see some changes of the narratives from the professional media, and they're actually digging into those Russian numbers, and they're finding more and more proof that it is really bad for Russia. And some of that specific proof is actually been discussed here in the article by Martin Sandbu. He summarizes a more detailed report, to link to which I will leave in description. It's a very nerdy readout about the Russian economy and Russian corporate borrowing rates and what it is doing to Russia. What Russia has been doing is they've been lending money to dedicated number of corporations that are specifically targeting production for the weapons industry, and they've been subsidizing their rates extensively. They've been subsidizing them so much that they've not only completely, in just their borrowing costs, not only completely overshadowed their state budget, they're overshadowing their incomes that they get from the oil and all of the other industries of Russia. It is ludicrous just how much money Russia has essentially printed. This is a hidden time bomb that is working only while it is not fully understood that this bomb is existing there. And in details, this article goes to describe just how bad the situation could be for Russia if their banking system will start crumbling. And the fact of the matter is that their banking system is already crumbling. And the only way they can try to salvage what they're having right now is if they get the access to some kind of foreign capital, foreign investment. Because with the current sanction package, they are really, really on the brink of destruction. I've talked to you many times that dictatorships oftentimes look very strong until suddenly they just snap and explode and they are demolished. This article basically outlines exactly the economic time bomb that is there under Russia. And if the conditions continue deteriorating for Russia, it's not going to be a small decline, slow decline. It's going to be boom, and Russia is gone. And already traditionally, we're finishing up highlighting some of the Russian modern technology. Here we see Russian assault wagon, which was a Scooby-Doo van, but we talked about the fact that Russians are interested in maybe some kind of an open design recently. So here you can see a 50-50, where they essentially cut off half of that Scooby-Doo van, but they still put some of the nets on the front here. So yeah, it's an interesting wagon, and it has been captured during one of the storming operations of Russians just riding towards the Ukrainian positions. Beyond that, here is a BTR 80 of the Russian units, and it's becoming more and more difficult and complex to actually recognize any of the Russian equipment. I know the first thing people will see here is this mud remover, and that is obviously something functional, but I would point you towards the other parts of this design, the high coupe, the special window that they have here on the top side for the crew to get out. Absolutely amazing, total innovation in the Russian design. Remember that all of that, the fact that Russian military is becoming this scrappy, this bad, is all thanks to you, because you keep supporting Ukrainian armed forces. So I call on you, if you can, participate in our current fundraiser for the Ukrainian armed forces. We're trying to get 25 vehicles. We are already past 95,000, which is an incredible amount. It's almost 10 vehicles here. So let's do it. Participate now, support the Ukrainian armed forces, trust in Ukrainian armed forces. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.
Мій позивний Девіл, я снайпер головного управління розвідки, а саме підрозділу Артан. Хочу подякувати за надану допомогу автівки і не тільки, реби і все інше, Ukraine Matters та його підписникам. Дякую, друзі, за вашу роботу тяжку. Та робота, яку ви робите, вона нас наближає до перемоги. Дякую вам. Слава Україні! Героям слава!